Hello, BookTube. I've been feeling a little bit under the weather for the last few days. A number of you have emailed and commented on it. I think it's pretty obvious in my videos, and certainly obvious from the number of videos. If I'm only making one video a day, that means I either have a crushing deadline or I feel like crap on somebody's shoe. And if I had a crushing deadline, I would probably complain to you about it. But the first thing this morning, as dawn was coming up, I found that I was feeling better a little bit. So I did what anybody would do. I overdid things. I went to the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston, a great used bookstore in downtown Boston that I've been going to for a long time. It has 3 floors of stacked shelves, and it also has a gigantic sale lot outside. Thousands more books for $1, $3, and $5, organized only by price. So you literally have to look at everything to know what's out there. You can't write anything off. And I had a wonderful time. It was a little bit chilly and very windy, but I had a wonderful time, and I got a stack of books that I wanted to show you. And the first few of these are paperbacks, and the first 3 of them, maybe the first 6 of them, reflect a possible event. You may have heard rumors of an event coming in August here to BookTube. An event that celebrates the reading of garbage, the reading of trash, and celebrates the fact that we can do that without any kind of guilt. We don't have to, none of us have to explain our reading taste to anybody else, right? We certainly don't have to explain them to each other. And trash can be a lot of fun. and although I'm sure that I have plenty of trash already here, knowing that such an event is coming naturally pricks up my antenna for more trash that I might get. And I found some. I found, for instance, this. This author is pretty much synonymous with trash. This is Renegade of Callisto by Lynn Carter. A rather nice cover there. And if you're looking at that cover and you're thinking, wait a minute, Earthman, monster almost twice his size, obviously allies fighting side by side against a horde of monsters who look a lot like that monster. That reminds me of John Carter of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. You wouldn't be far off. This is Lynn Carter's, let's call it an homage to the John Carter stories, where his character transports to Callisto, the moon of Jupiter, a moon of Jupiter, and finds there a fantasy world of aliens and beautiful princesses and warring clans, and he promptly takes off his clothing. It's a tropical area, and has all sorts of adventures. I think Renegade of Callisto is the last of these that Lynn Carter wrote, I think. And you can see there, this is, it's volume 8. I don't know how many volumes there are in this series, though. It's Jandar of Callisto, and Jandar is the way that it's John Dark, or James Dark, or something like that. I forget his actual name. Is it tell me? Oh God, no, you're all, the spine-tingling tradition of Edgar Rice Burroughs. You're all about the plot of this book. I think it's James Dark. Anyway, the natives of the planet change his name to Jandar, and that's who he is. He's not a native to Callisto. Actually, does this give me a list? I've read all of these books at one point or another. Yeah, Jandar of Callisto is the first one. Oh, Renegade of Callisto is the last one. Okay. I've read all of these things. There was a time in my life, a long, long time ago, when I had a bottomless hunger for more Tales of Barsoom. And Edgar Rice Burroughs only wrote a few. And the Edgar Rice Burroughs literary estate, Tarzana, California, is weird about how they license things. They really are. They need a whole new crew. There ought to be a whole bunch of John Carter of Mars licensed novels. There are some comics. They're very bad. I have to believe that they're just not inspected. I don't know. One way or another, I've never understood the marketing of Edgar Rice Burroughs' literary estate. I've never understood that. I think that they have consistently missed an opportunity over 70 years to make a boatload of money. And they're going to lose that opportunity. All of that stuff is slowly moving into the common domain, in which After which point, you can do what, for instance, Dracula, the Bram Stoker literary estate, you can do what they did and try to give a little bit of shine to somebody's pastiche by saying it's officially authorized by the estate. But anyway, I remember these things being really dumb, but really good reading, really fun. I read this one. I wonder if this will give me the original date when this came out. 1978. Yeah, I read this probably in 78. Probably, I don't recall this cover. I don't think my cover looked like this. But this isn't. It says Dell SF Fantasy, but I don't think this is an American cover. I don't think this is an American edition at all. They're lightweight popcorn fantasy. They don't have the singular cheesy conviction of their model of the John Carter stories, and like the John Carter stories, the NASA nerd in me, while I was reading these things, was thinking, well, no matter what you do with clashing swords and beautiful maidens and whatnot, the real place, the real Mars, for instance, is infinitely more interesting than what Edgar Rice Burroughs thought up. And the same thing is true of Callisto, which is an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing to study. We know quite a bit about it. It's a moon of Jupiter. It's one of the moons that Galileo first saw and pointed out were moons that got him in a world of trouble, because you think nothing of it now. But what are you saying? If you train a telescope on the night sky and you say these 4 objects are revolving around Jupiter, what are you saying? You're saying that Jupiter is the center of their world, not Earth. And Callisto is fascinating. It's unlike a lot of the other major. Callisto is fairly big. It's a little bit smaller than the planet Mercury, and unlike a lot of Jupiter's other big sort of mineral-rich, maybe water-rich moons, it's far enough away from Jupiter's own radiation field so that it's not an instant death sentence to live on the surface. If you had some sort of terraformed habitat, you might have to deal with a very light gravity and a whole bunch of other stuff, but you wouldn't necessarily have to deal with the raining sheet curtains of hard radiation given off by Jupiter, like a lot of Jupiter's other moons do have to deal with. And we've had many probes make close inspections of Callisto, and it's highly likely, I think it's highly likely, that there's an enormous water ocean under the surface of Callisto. Callisto's surface is nothing to write home about. The planet never moves. It has no atmosphere. It has no ionosphere, no magnetosphere. So it gets pelted. It has no volcanic activity. So its surface is just an unbroken quilt of meteorite impact craters. But all it takes is a few of those over millennia that are mostly made of water for you to start accumulating an ocean. Possible even that the accretion elements that made Callisto in the first place had all sorts of water or ice. In other words, what I'm saying is, I'm sure that some science fiction writer has written an adventure set on Callisto that has nothing to do with flashing swords and 10-foot tall monsters with antenna. There's nothing to do with that. I'm sure there's a science fiction novel out there about Callisto, about a research team going there in person and maybe finding life in that subterranean ocean. Because if water can get there, then microbes can get there. I'm sure there is such a thing. If you know of such a story, a science fiction story set on Callisto, the real Callisto, not the one in these Jandar stories, feel free to let me know. But if we were to develop a list, let's say, of what constitutes garbage, well, homage fiction almost certainly would be an element there. It's almost always garbage. Books that have very high numbers. They write where the series goes on forever and ever. This is volume 8. That would certainly qualify. The cheap paper would qualify. Is there some point in the book an ad for processed weaponized tobacco? An ad for something that will kill the person who's reading the book? that sort of thing. And also, of course, gratuitous nudity, that all the crappy writing. I have a feeling I'm going to get quite a bit of that in the rest of the trash that I found today. Like this thing, for instance. This is by James Dark. It is a Mark Hood thriller called Come Die With Me. Look at that. He is outside their door. She has her hands tied, and it looks like there's a cop standing there, both of them underneath the ceiling fan. This is a new series. This Come Die With Me is the first one. And this Mark Hood is an audacious secret agent from Intertrust. I believe this came out in 1965. I've never read any of these. I think that James Dark is a pseudonym, and I remember correctly, the author is Australian. I want to say Australian. I once knew this story because I saw this in a bookstore a long time ago and wondered about it. I checked. This is not my copy, but I have a feeling, if I remember correctly, the author is not only Australian, but just horrifically prolific, like 8 books a year or something like that. So I don't expect this to be any good at all. Not at all. Hence, garbage. Then this next one, I would have instantly called it garbage. But the more I think about it, the more I think that this guy has some sort of cult status. Now that could still mean it's garbage. We would still need to work out the rules. Whether or not something's a cult classic doesn't exonerate it from being garbage, right? I would say it probably doesn't. But this is Peter Rabe. This is A House in Naples. How about that cover? And this is a tough, gritty novel about a guy who's trying to defect from the army in World War II era with a whole bunch of stolen money. And he's been shot, so he's got a wound that what do we have here? Charlie's rope was about frayed out. The police were after him. He had a bullet in his hip and no passport. Charlie needed a passport bad. He needed that intricate piece of paper, signed, sealed, and innocent looking, the way only a GI in Italy could need one. A GI deserter with a sweet fortune in blackmail lira and the police lusting to lay hands on him. Charlie got it. He got it off the body of a dead American drunk, and afterwards he weighed the body with metal and put it in the Tiber under an old bridge where the water was deep and the smell in the air was very bad. He came up from under the bridge bleeding from the hip again, feeling as if his lungs were bursting, and that was when he saw her. She was leaning over the side of the bridge, looking down at him, and the way the night shadows hit her and her hair hung down, cupping her face, she was very beautiful. Only to Charlie, she looked like a monster. I'm guessing this is trash. No matter how many Starkhouse reprints there are of this guy, I'm guessing this is trash. And this author is another example, so many that crop up on this channel, of a writer whose own personal story is almost as fascinating as the potboiler yarns that he came up with for money. This author also was incredibly prolific, and also, like James Dark, wrote under a whole bunch of pseudonyms, although I believe this is his name. I think he wrote a couple of books under his own name, and I think this is one of them. But I've never read it, and I'm not going to read it until August. And then, these next 3, I hesitate to call them garbage. They probably are. In fact, I've read 2 of them, and we will come August. We will have to decide on the rules. We'll have to decide on a taxonomic designation of what is and is not trash. Like, for instance, if something is a pastiche novel, is it likely that it's trash? Right? These Jandar novels are technically pastiche novels. Well, technically they're not, actually, because they change all the names. They had to, because Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated would have gone right after Lynn Carter if he hadn't. But what about pastiche novels where they don't change anything, where it's allowed, where it's authorized? Aren't most of those trash? Would we say that? Would we be comfortable saying that? How many examples can you think of outside of, for instance, Sherlock Holmes, where pastiche novels aren't garbage? Technically, whether they're enjoyable or not. And how much does being enjoyable exonerate something from being garbage? Or does it not matter? Well, anyway, that was on my mind because the next 3 books are pastiche novels, and they're all Conan pastiche novels. I knew when I was looking at these that I have a whole bunch of ebooks of Conan pastiche novels. A whole bunch of you have been very generous about your Conan ebooks. Uh, but, like, for instance, this first one, I know that I have this, but I know that I don't have it with this cover. This is Conan the Rebel by science fiction author Poul Anderson. I know that I've read this, and I know that I have it as an ebook, but I don't have it with this cover. And I don't remember it being all that good. So it's Revolt of the Slaves against the reptile god of the evil sorcerer Kemi. Okay. So we shall see. Don't I remember? Some of you will be far more versed in this than I do. Don't I remember that Bantam did a whole line of Conan books that had this same logo design? I could swear they did, and that they were numbered. This is number 6. I could swear that like the first 5 were numbered, and had a look like this. Although a lot of those novels, the front cover folded out to a poster, and this one doesn't. But I grabbed it anyway because, you know, certainly part of one aspect of trash is the crappy paperback that's just going to fall apart and that isn't meant to live. And then I found a couple of other Conan pastiche novels. It was only after I got them back here. They were only $1 a piece, and I was working on store credit, so none of these things cost me anything. But it was only when I got them back here that I realized you probably have these in ebook form. And I don't know. That's an open question. That's a question that I'm dealing with a lot these days, is under what circumstances am I ever going to pick up a paperback if I have the ebook? I still haven't just sat down and grappled explicitly with that question in order to get an answer. And I wonder if the reason why isn't because I know on some level that the answer is never. And if the answer is never, then what am I doing with all these books? but I'm putting off that question at least for now, maybe for the whole summer, and then when the fall comes. Certainly it's an end of the year question. At the end of the year, I will need to look at that really hard. If I've got 4,000 books here, is there any reason why I shouldn't have 40 books here, not 4,000? But in the meantime, I got a couple more Conan pastiche novels. One by Harry Turtledove, which may elevate this out of the category of possible trash, because Harry Turtledove is a good writer, pastiche or no pastiche. This is Conan of Venarium. And there, I don't know if you can make that out on the cover. It's a very young Conan that we're dealing with, just a boy. As he says in, Michael K. Vaughan would know, is it Beyond the Black River, where he reminisces and says that he was at the Siege of Venarium when he was 15? So a teenage Conan. Naturally, the cover gives me a little bit of conflict there, because of course I want to root for our Cimmerian barbarian, but I don't want to root for anybody who's putting an arrow through the throat of one of my babies. Why not just talk to it instead? Is my natural response. Even when I was a little kid, and we'd all be out together and we'd encounter some, angry barking dog. And I had an uncle who used to say, just mimic like you're stooping down to pick up a rock and they'll run right off. They know by instinct that that's a danger. I would always say, even, 5 or 6 years old, I'd say, why not just talk to them? And then I would proceed to do that. But I don't know that I've read this. I've read a lot of Harry Turtledove, but I haven't read all of them. I don't know that I've read this. And I'm not sure. I mean, a Conan who's 15 years old, this will, I think, probably be Harry Turtledove's fleshed out story of the brief reminiscence that Conan makes in, I think, Beyond the Black River. I think this will be the whole of that story. And I like Harry Turtledove as an author, but what can you do with a 15-year-old Conan? Conan has no experience at anything. I don't know. I guess I'll find out. And then a Conan trade paperback that nods at least a little to Roy Thomas. This is Conan and the Grim Grey God by Sean Moore. And I'm absolutely positive that I have this as an ebook. But now I have it as a beautiful, new condition trade paperback, and we will see which of those wins when it comes time to read this in August. Which of those will win? Which of those will I feel like doing? It's partly a matter of sheer convenience right? Who knows where these things will be in August? I don't. They'll be here somewhere, but who knows where they'll be? What happens if I am laying on the fainting couch or in bed and I've got a certain someone sprawled on top of me or curled up in a tight little ball on top of me? In August, she'll probably be sprawled. And I decide, well, let's say I just finish a book on Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter, for instance, and think, well, it's a perfect palate cleanser, and because it's the month of August where we're celebrating trash, now is the perfect time for Conan and the Grim Grey God. What happens if at that moment I think about that and A, I have no idea where this paperback is anywhere here in Hyde Cottage, and B, I couldn't get up for it if I wanted to because someone is sleeping on top of me, and C, I've got the ebook right there on a Kobo right next to the bed. Anyway, we shall see. But all of that garbage eventually made me feel a little bit guilty. So I'm good. We're going to finish up with books that aren't garbage. Like, for instance, this murder mystery. This is by Michael Pierce, and this is The Mamre Zapt and the Men Behind. This is a novel, this was a series of murder mysteries set in a Cairo that was still under British rule. And Mamre Zapt is sort of a quasi colloquialized title for the guy who solves the murder mysteries. Cadwallader Smith, I think his name was, or Cadwallader Jones. Cadwallader Owen is in charge of solving murder mysteries. And there were a few, this was not the first book in the series. There were a few before this, but I think it was this one where this series changed publishers. And suddenly I was seeing them at my bookstore. Suddenly I was shelving them because this must have come out in the 90s. 1991. I don't think I noticed these before then, and then I did. This was the first one that I read. Long since gone, like the snows of yesteryear. I had no idea what happened to my original copy. I checked. This is not it. But I read a whole bunch of the other books in the series and really liked it. So I don't think I have any of these on ebook. I know I don't have them in hardcover, and I don't have any of my original copies, and I'm not all that interested in reading them in order because this is the one I read first, so it's due for a reread. Then a little bit of classics. I found something almost all of these are from the Brattle, the dollar cards outside. And I found one thing with the plastic library covering on it that fits in a series of things that I've had a long time ago. Who did this? The University of Oklahoma Press did a Centers of Civilization series where they did these short little books about a certain city in the age of a certain person. Walter Muir Whitehill famously did Boston in the age of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. But there are a whole bunch of others. We've seen a whole bunch of them. Over the years, when I've hauled books, we've seen a whole bunch of others. And I found this one today by Charles Robinson, Athens in the Age of Pericles. The Centers for Civilization series. Really good series. I would gladly have them all. They're not comprehensive, obviously, at this length. So instead, it brings out the wit and insight of the authors because they know they're not writing a standard textbook, so they're free to meditate on the subject. I've never read a book in the series that I didn't like. And this is on my mind anyway because of Con Iggulden, the historical fiction, men's adventure type writer whose latest book is about Pericles and I thought was quite good. In fact, in some little ways, quite different from anything I've read from that author. So it's sort of on my mind. Pericles is sort of on my mind as a character anyway. So I found this and grabbed it. And nearby, I found this thing, which is considerably older. When did this come out? Are you going to tell me? 1894. This is very much the same thing. I don't know if you can make it out. Pericles. It's an ex-library copy, but let's get the Pericles and the Golden Age of Athens by Evelyn Abbott. So it's illustrated all throughout. There's the man himself. It's illustrated all throughout, and it was meant to be, a scholarly treatise on the subject. Very much not what this was meant to be. But I couldn't resist the opportunity to, read the two of these back to back when the books themselves are separated by a century and see where they agree, where they diverge, which one is more entertaining to read. I don't know anything about uh, illustrations in here. I don't know anything about Evelyn Abbott as a writer. I know that he was once upon a time famous for A History of Greece, I think. This book is in a series called Heroes of the Nations that I think he created. I think he founded that series, and he was also one of the other. He was an Oxford Classics Don, and the only other thing I know about him is that he comes from a small village in Nottinghamshire that is utterly delightful. I spent 2 nights in that little village a long, long time ago. Started with a horrible first impression because I was crossing country to get to this little village, this tiny little thing, 500 people at most. Maybe it's huge now, maybe it's grown, but it was 500 people at the time. And I was crossing country to get there. I was kind of interested in, a meal and a roof over my head for the night. And I had no idea that I was trespassing. I had no idea if I was trespassing that the guy whose land I was trespassing on would be in such a bad mood. But he was suddenly there and turned his dogs on me. Me and my dogs. I had a big group of dogs with me. He turned his dogs on me. Imagine, instead of saying hello or would you mind or anything like that, it was absolutely insane. Of course, the dogs they came charging towards us, and I had my boys, I had my beagles, and the beagle that I put in charge of all my other beagles stiffened just a little, wondering, what to do. Do we coordinate and tear these dogs apart, or do we hold them off and a few of us go and tear the human apart, or what would you like us to do? And I said, instead I wanted nothing of that at all. Instead, I started face smooching with the dogs, who quickly realized, with the farmer's dogs, who quickly realized what was what, the lay of the land. He came blustering up, wanting to know, did I throw the meat and was it poisoned or anything like that. And I gave him a stern talking to. I said, what on earth is this? You don't know me at all. What on earth is this? What kind of behavior is this? I'd be willing to bet you call yourself a Christian, and this is what you did to a total stranger. I had no idea I was trespassing on your land, and even if I did, this is how you introduce yourself? And he seemed abashed. we got to talking. It was a classic Steve Dogs and extrovert moment. We got to talking. And worked things out completely. I told him, there's no harm done here. If you don't want me crossing this land, fine, I'll go around. And by the time I got to that point, he was saying, oh, no, it's no problem. Go right ahead. Anyway, that's all I know about the author. We will see. This will make a very interesting reading combination, which doesn't often happen at the Brattle. I don't usually try to coerce the tables like that, the sale cards. I usually just let things go the way they are. Then the next one is a biography. I've had this many times. I have a whole biography section here at Hyde Cottage. And a large part of that section is royalty, British royalty. I think it's, for me, hands down the most entertaining way to read English history is to read biographies of various monarchs, going all the way back to Athelstan. And this is Christopher Almond's famous biography of Henry V from the English Monarch series. It was this University of California did an English Monarch series right alongside the Yale English Monarch series. And some fantastic books are in this series. They all have that little colophon up on the top there. At one point or another, I've had all of these. I had this for the longest time, but then somebody, whether it was before BookTube, and it was just a friend of mine, wanted to take it when they were here, or whether it was one of you during BookTube that said, I am most interested in this king. What do you recommend? I still haven't broken the reflex in myself when somebody does that to say, oh, I definitely recommend this book, and I have a copy, and I'll send it to you. When that is totally beyond the pale. That does not need to happen. No one is expecting that. No one is expecting that. The most people are expecting is that I will recommend something. A good, intelligent recommendation. No one is expecting me to give them a copy, much less my own copy. I ought to realize that so that I don't keep rebuying books. But I rebought this. It, needless to say, will also be the subject of that acid test. Will I read it? Or will I find the ebook? We shall see. This next one, though, I don't need to worry. I have a feeling that when all this shakes out, there are going to be books here, 40 books here, 400 books here. And some of them will have particular qualities about them. It won't be that they're collectible or that they're pretty. There'll be other aspects, things that ebooks don't do as well as printed books. And I have noticed that one of the things ebooks don't do as well as printed books is allow you to live inside a very large book. They're infinitely superior when it comes to very large books in storage, in comfortable reading, but they don't allow you to live inside that book. They don't allow you to roam easily from one part to the next. They certainly don't allow you to, put anything inside the text. You can annotate it to your heart's content, but you can't store anything in it. I have a feeling that when the dust settles here, the books that will largely survive will be the ones that are over 800 pages. Because to me, it seems like there are elements of that reading experience, even subjective ones, that just don't survive to the ebook of the same title. So I got this book, and this is not the first time that I've had a copy of this. It's probably not the first time I've hauled a copy of this. This is edited by Zachary Leader, and this is The Letters of Kingsley Amos. This huge thing here, which I have had and given away so many times. Now I'm planning on keeping this volume and just practicing that discipline so that when somebody says, ooh, I really want that book, but I live in a book desert and I don't trust online book dealers, okay, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. People do live in book deserts, and I don't blame you for not trusting online book dealers. That doesn't mean I have to give you my copy. That just means I have to find you a copy. The turnover at the Brattle, I can certainly do that. In a year, a few months, nobody's got an urgent need for these things, so I just need to learn to do that. None of you are expecting me to send you my own copy. None of you have, I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, thousands of book requests from you over the years because of this channel. No one has ever said make it snappy. No one's ever even dreamed of doing that. So in other words, this time I plan to keep this volume. And this is a perfect example of what I was talking about. It's a letter collection, so of course that exaggerates the quality that I'm talking about. Because you don't really expect to read a letter collection all the way through from front to back. The first time I read this, when it first came out, I did. But every time I've revisited it since then, I haven't. I've just sort of jumped around. And that doesn't replicate well in an ebook. So I grabbed this again. I am, I think, on the threshold of a large amount of Kingsley Amos rereading, the novels and especially the nonfiction, even his stuff about James Bond. I'd like to find all of that out. I'd like to read all of that. And of course, part and parcel of doing that will be reading these things and also reading Zachary Leader's biography of Kingsley Amos, which is definitive. No one's ever going to do a better job, I don't think, than Zachary Leader did. I'm on the verge of that. That will probably happen this year. But it wouldn't matter anyway, because this is a delightful volume. Absolutely delightful. It is, it's moving. It's really engaging. It's tremendously annotated. Tremendously. Which is what you really need with a big letter collection. You need to be sure that the author, the compiler, the editor, whoever, is right there at the bottom of every page, carefully explaining all of the allusions that no one in their letters actually explains to their correspondent. That needs to be there, or it's gibberish. Amos wasn't like a great number of people who have collected letters who were clearly writing for the publication view of the whole world. He was writing to the friend in their own argot. So you need that, and this volume has that magnificently all throughout. It'd be half this size if it didn't have the notes. But it can also be extremely funny, which I guess wouldn't come as a surprise if anybody remembered Kingsley Amos's novels. Jake's thing is really funny. But it still surprises me whenever I go through this, whenever I plink down in here anywhere at random. So I grabbed it to keep it. I grabbed this volume to keep this volume. And that was my trip to the Brattle today, to overdo it on the tiny store of energy that I now have. We have the Letters of Kingsley Amos. Big fat brick of a thing. We have Almond's biography of Henry V, probably the greatest biography of this Shakespeare monarch. We have two books on Pericles, one by a scholar 120 years ago, and one by a popularizer 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Then we have Conan and the Grim Grey God. We have Conan of Venarium, teenage Conan. We have Conan the Rebel by the science fiction author Poul Anderson. We have The Mammerzapt and the Men Behind, one installment in a historical murder mystery series. We have A House in Naples by Peter Rapp, the prolific Peter Rapp. We have Come Die With Me by the author going under the house name of James Dark, who was 10 times as prolific as Peter Rapp. And finally, we have Renegade of Callisto, the final volume in Lynn Carter's Callisto novels, which, if I'm remembering correctly, does not actually conclude. I mean, it's the final volume in the series, but I don't think Lynn Carter wraps it up. I think, the door is left open for there to be more books. I don't know if I'm remembering that correctly, but I will give it a reread come August, and we will see. But anyway, this has gone on quite long enough. That was my my out of bed and full of beans Brattle book haul here. I went out against the advice of counsel and milled around with the books for a little while. But it's nice to see your faces again. So I will wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.